No one really prepares you for what it feels like to live alone after downsizing in old age. Everyone talks about the packing, the moving trucks, the fresh start, but they skip the quiet moments after the boxes are gone. The ones where you sit in your smaller living room, coffee in hand, and think, well, now what? It's not bad. In fact, it can be beautiful, but it's definitely different. In this video, I want to share the things no one tells you about living alone after downsizing, the honest, funny, sometimes emotional truths you only learn once you've done it yourself. So, grab a cup of tea, or something stronger if it's been that kind of week, and let's talk about the real side of starting over later in life, the side that no brochure or real estate agent ever mentions. Number 1. The first few weeks feel like a long exhale. You know that feeling after holding your breath for too long, then finally letting it out? That's what the first few weeks after downsizing feel like. A long, slow exhale. But here's the thing no one tells you. It's not just peaceful right away, it's weirdly quiet. The first morning you wake up in your smaller home, there's no creak of someone moving around, no TV murmuring from the next room, no background buzz. It's just you. And the fridge, which, by the way, you'll suddenly start noticing has a very judgmental hum when you open it at 2 a.m. At first, that quiet can feel almost uncomfortable, like the universe hit the mute button. One woman said, "The silence was so loud, I thought I'd gone deaf." But give it a few days, and something amazing happens. That quiet starts to feel like a soft blanket around you. You start to notice small things again. The sound of birds in the morning, how your coffee actually tastes, how your thoughts wander without interruption. You realize just how much of your old life was spent reacting to everyone else's noise. Now, it's your rhythm that fills the air. You don't have to rush breakfast because someone else needs the kitchen. You can sing in the shower, even if you sound like a wounded goose. You can read on the couch until 2 a.m. because there's no one there to tell you to turn that light off. Those first few weeks are like adjusting to a new altitude. Your breathing changes, your pace slows down, and you start realizing this is what peace actually feels like. A man I once met in a retirement group told me, "The best thing about living alone after downsizing is that I no longer need permission to take up space in my own life." That line stuck with me, because that's exactly what those early weeks are about, claiming your space again. 2. Downsizing teaches you what enough really means. Nobody warns you that downsizing feels a bit like emotional surgery. You think you're just sorting through old furniture, but really, you're sorting through decades of your life. You open boxes you haven't looked at in years and find a pile of old birthday cards, a shirt you swore you'd fit into again, a souvenir from a trip you barely remember. And suddenly, you're sitting on the floor, surrounded by stuff that feels like little ghosts of who you used to be. It's tough. No sugarcoating it. You'll cry a little, laugh a little, and question why on earth you kept 4 toasters. But then something shifts. Once you move into your smaller space and everything fits just right, you start to feel lighter. You realize that having less doesn't mean losing. It means finally being surrounded only by things that actually matter. A retired teacher on a senior living forum wrote, "I didn't realize how much mental clutter my physical clutter caused." That's so true. When you have fewer things, you spend less time cleaning, organizing, and worrying about where something is. Your brain starts to unclutter too. And it's funny. You begin to feel proud of your new minimalist ways. You look around your neat little home and think, why did I ever think I needed a 12-seater dining table? You start to see that enough isn't about space or stuff. It's about fit. Does your home fit your current life? Do your belongings serve who you are now, not who you were 30 years ago? One man downsized from a 4-bedroom family home to a 1-bedroom apartment near the lake. He said, "At first I thought I'd miss my old place. But now, everything I love fits within arm's reach, and that's exactly how I like it." That's the beauty of it. Downsizing is learning that enough isn't less. It's perfectly right. 3. You rediscover yourself, sometimes by accident. This one sneaks up on you. You move into your smaller home thinking it's just a change of address, and then suddenly you find yourself doing things you haven't done in decades. You start humming again while cooking. You find that old box of paints or that half-written poem. You dust off the guitar you swore you'd learn someday. And this time, because you've got peace, time, and no one watching, you actually do it. One man said that after his wife passed, he started cooking for himself out of necessity. Just to survive, he said. But before long, he fell in love with it. Now I make lasagna from scratch, and I talk to my sauce like it's a friend, he joked. My kids think I've lost it, but I've never felt more alive. That's the kind of rediscovery that happens when you live alone. There's something about solitude that makes creativity and curiosity wake up again. You start asking yourself, what do I actually enjoy? Not what your family liked, not what you did for others. You. I remember one senior woman who took up online art classes after downsizing. She said she hadn't drawn since high school. Now her walls are covered with her own paintings. It's funny, she said. I thought I'd miss my big house. Turns out I just missed myself, and maybe that's the secret gift of this stage of life. You get to meet yourself again. You remember that you're not just a parent, grandparent, or former professional. You're still the curious, funny, creative soul you've always been. Living alone gives you that space to breathe and rediscover what makes you you. It's like shaking hands with an old friend you forgot you missed. And yes, you might dance in the kitchen sometimes. You might talk to your plants or binge-watch old westerns just because. But those little moments, they're not signs of loneliness. They're signs of life. 4. The emotional hangover is real, but temporary. No one tells you this part because honestly, it's hard to put into words. You think the hardest part of downsizing is sorting through your things, but it's not. It's the quiet after. It hits once the boxes are unpacked and you sit down in your new living room for the first time. The space is smaller, the walls are different, and you suddenly realize you're not just missing a house. You're missing a chapter of your life. That's the emotional hangover. You start remembering things like the way sunlight used to fall through your old kitchen window, or how your grandkids used to run down that long hallway laughing. Those memories sneak up on you when you least expect them. I remember one guy who said, "I didn't cry when I moved out. I cried 3 days later when I realized I'd never mow that lawn again." That's exactly how it happens. Small things trigger big emotions. And it's okay. In fact, it's healthy. That ache you feel isn't regret. It's simply the echo of a home that served you well. You're grieving what was familiar, and that takes time. But here's the good news. It passes. One woman said something beautiful. I treated my sadness like a visitor. I let it sit with me, have its cup of tea, and then leave when it was ready. That's the trick. You let the feelings come, you honor them, and then you gently let them go. Give yourself time to settle in. Within weeks, your new space starts to take on your scent, your touch, your rhythm. Before you know it, you'll be saying, "This actually feels like home." So yes, the emotional hangover is real. But like most hangovers, it fades. And when it does, you realize something quietly wonderful. The memories didn't stay in the old house. They came with you. 5. Loneliness sneaks in, unless you plan for it. Now let's talk about that sneaky little visitor. Loneliness. Even the most independent person gets hit with it sometimes. You'll be watching TV, reach for your cup of tea, and suddenly realize there's no one on the other couch. No background noise, just you, the chair, and maybe the neighbor's dog barking through the window. It can feel strange, even heavy, at first. But here's what I've learned. Loneliness isn't the same as being alone. Being alone is a state of being. Loneliness is a lack of connection. And connection doesn't have to come from living with someone. It comes from reaching out intentionally. One man on a senior forum said he built what he called his coffee crew. Every morning at 9 a.m., he and a few neighbors from his apartment complex would bring their mugs down to the lobby and chat for half an hour. No agenda, no fuss, just laughter and a little caffeine therapy. He said it changed everything. "It gave my mornings a reason," he wrote, "and it turns out everyone else was craving the same thing." That's the secret: structure. Loneliness thrives in unplanned time. It sneaks in when the day feels too long or too quiet. That's why it helps to map out your days intentionally. Even something as simple as using a senior digital planner can make a big difference. It keeps your week organized with small rituals, social moments, and reminders to stay active and connected. I'll link one of my favorite senior-friendly planners in the pinned comment. It's simple, visual, and made specifically for people like us who want to stay sharp and independent. And humor helps too. I remember one widower who said, "I talk to my Alexa so much, she probably thinks we're dating." That made me laugh, but honestly, he's onto something. We humans just need a little connection, even if it's with a voice assistant that calls us by name. So, when you move into your new home, plan for connection like you plan for furniture. Build it right into your routine. Because when companionship becomes intentional, loneliness doesn't stand a chance. 6. You learn that independence isn't about being alone. It's about being capable. Here's a truth that surprises a lot of people. Living alone doesn't make you independent. Learning to handle things on your own does. When you first move into a smaller home, you'll probably have a few "oh boy" moments, like the first time a light bulb goes out and you realize there's no one else to change it. Or when your computer crashes and you stare at the screen like it just insulted you personally, but then something shifts. You figure it out. You YouTube it. You call a neighbor. You improvise. And when it works, you feel like you just won Survivor. Senior Edition. That's the beauty of living alone. You start building little victories every day. You stop waiting for someone to fix things and start realizing, hey, I can do this. I read a story from a woman who'd never owned a toolkit before. When her curtain rod fell down, she decided to fix it herself. She went to the hardware store, learned how to use a drill, and got it done. She said, "It may not be straight, but it's mine." That kind of confidence is gold. And it's not just about fixing things. It's about managing life on your own terms. Paying your bills, cooking your meals, driving where you want, deciding what time you go to bed. It all builds a quiet strength that seeps into every part of your life. One man said, "After my wife passed, I realized how much she used to do, everything from taxes to laundry. Now I do it all myself, and it feels like I finally met the other half of me." Independence isn't cold or lonely. It's warm. It's empowering. It's knowing you can rely on yourself and still enjoy the company of others when you choose to. There's a pride that comes with that. A kind of gentle self-respect that makes you walk a little taller. You stop feeling like you're on your own and start realizing you're in charge. And that, my friend, is one of the most rewarding discoveries of living alone after downsizing. Realizing that you're not just surviving this new chapter, you're mastering it. 7. You'll probably form new micro-rituals that make your day. When you first move into a smaller space, you think the routines from your old house will follow you, but they don't, at least not all of them. You're not shuffling around a big kitchen anymore or juggling the schedules of a busy household. The pace changes, and that's when these small, beautiful micro-rituals start to appear. They're not grand things. They're quiet moments that start to give your days shape and soul. Maybe it's sitting by the same window every morning with your coffee, watching the world wake up. Maybe it's an afternoon walk where you wave at the same dog walker every day, and one day you realize you know the dog's name, but not the owner's. Classic. One lady said she lights a candle every evening at 7 p.m., not for any reason, just because it marks the cozy part of the day. Another gentleman said he makes popcorn every Friday night and watches an old western. He calls it John Wayne therapy. What's interesting is how these little habits start forming naturally once the noise of old life fades away. You don't have to force them. They sort of rise up out of the calm. And before long, they're the highlight of your day. The beauty of micro-rituals is that they give you something to look forward to. They ground you. They whisper, "You're home. You're safe. You've got this." And on days when you feel a little off or lonely, these tiny routines are like small anchors keeping you steady. You'll be surprised by how sacred they become, how that one cup of tea at the same time, in the same chair, can feel like a friend showing up right on schedule. 8. You realize that comfort beats space every single time. Let me tell you, once you've lived in a big house where half the rooms are just collecting dust and old furniture, moving into a smaller space feels like putting on clothes that finally fit. At first, you might miss the size. You'll walk into your new living room and think, "Where on earth am I supposed to put everything?" But give it a few weeks, and that same room starts to feel perfect, warm, cozy, easy to clean, and yours. Comfort becomes the new luxury. You stop caring about space as a status symbol and start caring about how things feel. That old, oversized dining set gets replaced by a small round table where you can sip coffee and read the paper without having to shout across a football field. One woman said she turned her spare room into an art corner, a chair, a small desk, and her sketch pad. "It's tiny," she said, "but when I'm there, I feel bigger than I have in years." That's comfort, not measured in square feet, but in joy per inch. And the funny part? You realize how much of your old house you never actually used. Whole rooms were just there because they were there. Now, every corner of your home serves a purpose. Every chair gets sat in, every shelf holds something meaningful. When you start prioritizing comfort, your space stops being just a place to live. It becomes a hug you can walk into. 9. You'll surprise yourself with how adaptable you really are. I think this might be one of the most heartening discoveries that comes with downsizing, realizing that you're still capable of change. Most people underestimate themselves. They'll say, "Oh, I'm too old to move," or "I can't learn new things at my age." But then they do it anyway, and not only survive, but thrive. One man in his 70s shared that when he first moved into a small apartment, he couldn't even figure out how to use the new washer-dryer combo. "The thing had more buttons than my first car," he said. But a few YouTube videos later, he was an expert. He laughed and said, "Now I teach my grandkids how to use theirs." That's the spirit. Once you've lived through decades of raising families, working jobs, paying bills, and navigating life's storms, adapting to a smaller space, that's a walk in the park. Change always feels uncomfortable at first, but humans are built to adapt, especially those of us who've been around the block a few times. Within a few months, you'll find yourself knowing exactly where the best grocery store deals are, learning the neighbors' names, maybe even figuring out how to stream shows without calling your kids every 5 minutes. There's a quiet pride that comes from proving to yourself that you can still learn, adjust, and grow. That sense of capability gives you energy. It wakes you up in a new way. So if you ever doubt yourself, remember this: your whole life has been practice for adapting. You've done it before. You can do it again. 10. Downsizing isn't the end of the story, but the start. Here's the biggest secret no one tells you. Downsizing and living alone isn't the closing chapter of your story. It's the start of an entirely new one. You're not retreating, you're realigning. You're not losing life, you're finally gaining ownership of it. When you no longer have to keep up with a big house or the expectations of others, something incredible happens. You get to live on your own terms. You decide what your days look like, who you let into your life, and what you want to fill your time with. One gentleman said, "I thought moving into a smaller home meant shrinking my life. Turns out I just trimmed away everything that wasn't really living." That one hit me hard, because that's exactly what this stage can be. This chapter is about freedom. Not the flashy kind, but the peaceful, deeply satisfying kind. The kind that lets you take a nap at 2 p.m. if you feel like it, or start a garden in pots on your balcony, or finally take that train trip you've talked about for years. You realize that happiness isn't tied to square footage or how many people fill your house. It's tied to how authentic your days feel. And let's not forget, you're still writing this story. There's laughter waiting, friendships to build, quiet mornings to enjoy, and maybe even a little mischief to get into. Because let's be honest, a little mischief keeps life interesting. So no, my friend, this isn't the end. This is the part of the book where the main character, that's you, finally starts living for themselves. The pace slows, the scenery changes, but the heart of the story, it gets even richer. Because the truth is, once you let go of the noise and the clutter, you finally hear the most beautiful sound of all, your own life humming peacefully along. If you're standing at the edge of this chapter, packing boxes, selling furniture, and wondering how it'll all feel, know this: you're not stepping back, you're stepping in, into peace, into freedom, into a version of yourself that's lighter, wiser, and finally in charge of the volume knob of your own life. So go ahead. Brew your coffee the way you like it, rearrange that furniture for the 5th time, and hum to yourself in that quiet little home. You've earned every square foot of that piece. And if this video spoke to you, or if you're somewhere in the middle of that starting over chapter, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and share your own story below. I'd love to hear how you're making your smaller space or your solo life feel like home again. Because trust me, you're not alone in this.